we all know they're inheriting a load of problems, and we can't just say, well, that ain't true, because it is true. If they don't deliver real change, the end of that being the most right-wing government supported by a sort of rise of world fascism, I think that's what we're staring at.
We've been talking about the minimum service bill now for a couple of days. Seems to be the hot topic here. What's your objection to it?
Well, our objection to it is it's about defeating collectivism. It's about defeating everything that we've achieved as a movement in the last couple of years, and it's an outrageous attack. It's unfair in every sense. It's unnecessary. Clearly, like, they think by attacking some of the unions like the RMT, the railways, the fire brigade services, who already provide minimum service levels, and the NHS and the emergency workers that have always been clear that they would go and deal with the emergencies. They're using it as a deliberate attack on collectivism, and it won't end there. If we don't stand up and defend it for all workers, the unions that are directly affected. Our union at the moment isn't directly affected, but we all know it will be. That's why we're supporting the motion.
Looking forward to Christmas, the BMA have said, well, I've heard that apparently it's going to be very difficult for them to fill the rotas. Obviously people don't want to work Christmas, and this legislation is going to mean that they have to. Are you going to find something similar if perhaps you might be forced to provide workers on a strike day? Do you think some people would object?
Well, I think everybody's going to object to doing things that they shouldn't have to do and they don't want to do. I mean, look, workers, there'll always be workers that have shifts that go over Christmas. I mean, that's part of most big industries. But, what we can't do is have any worse terms and conditions or worse attacks on unions. I mean, as has been pointed out, these attacks have been going on, for a couple of 100 years now, and they just find different ways of making it harder and harder for working people to stand up together. And I think this particular legislation has been sort of brought out because they could realise that trade unions, were ready to sort of stand together now. And you've seen that with a wave of strikes over the last year or so. It's not going to achieve what it set out to achieve. So there's nothing in it that anybody should believe that is actually going to improve things, either for customers, because the fundamental problems are that they've already destroyed some of these services. They've already made life a misery. My saying all the time is, I think if you went around every single industry at the moment, every single workplace, every single company, there'll be a common problem, which is that you've got people at the top of the businesses who've got no solutions other than you just basically command and control management that kills the job, kills the company, kills the services. None of them have got a clue about how you actually grow businesses and how you actually grow services. And they're just there to make working people work harder and faster for less. And that problem is everywhere in the UK. And I think workers have known it. That's why they've supported the strikes, not just because of the cost of living crisis, but I think there's a crisis in morale in workers, there's a crisis in resourcing the services that you actually need, and there's certainly a crisis in management's lack of ability in the UK. I've never seen anything like it. Some of the people we've dealt with in Royal Mail, have come in, they were clearly on a union busting agenda. Fortunately, the CEO who brought them in has gone, but there's a few more need to move on. Similarly, the CEO in BT, after our dispute, he's gone. But I worry about the economy, I worry about the world of work from a very strong point of view that these people have been found out now. You can't get grotesque levels of wages at the top for basically destroying things and never growing anything, whilst you then make workers, you focus all your energies, as this government does, in blaming workers. And of course the government and these companies and the media and mainstream media are aligned.
So is the problem that workers are being treated as commodities? I mean, we heard from Mick Lynch earlier, his concern is that there are lots of outsourcing going on.
Yeah.
Not enough people on the books, and that is somehow creating a workplace that people don't want to be in. Is that what you're seeing?
Well, I think, again, if you went round and spoke to all the trade union leaders here, who represent the various workers across the economy, I think they'll tell you in most of these companies, they can't get staff. It's the same problem. I sit and listen, and I just relay everything I'm hearing to exactly what I'm seeing in the post office, in Royal Mail and in BT, and in our financial service areas. So the same problem has emerged, and they know that we're ready to use our collective strength like never before, and to build on it with serious strategies now to build collectivism, the sort of thing we were talking about earlier, about we have to deepen what solidarity really means. It's got to mean more than coming here once a year. It's got to mean more than even some coordinated action. It's got to be about strategies where you really do have common bargaining agendas to drive wages, terms, conditions, for workers, and a greater say for workers in the running of their company. And that's called collective bargaining across sectors of the economy. We can do it as trade unions. Don't have to wait for legislation change. We have to sit in a room together and work out these strategies. And we have to provide the answers and solutions that working people are looking for.
Well, speaking of strategies, so at the moment, this minimum service level, that's going to put the onus onto the worker, right? So if they don't turn up to work, they're going to be culpable.
Yeah, could be sacked as well.
They could be sacked. So what are you doing as a union? What are you doing to take away any of the onus being put onto them?
Well, the important thing to do is to sit down. I mean, obviously, we've got to find ways of supporting the workers in the trade unions who are going to be at the forefront of this attack. We can't leave it to them. And that means finding ways of talking to our members about what's happening, finding ways of, making sure our members support those workers. Non-compliance they're talking about, it's been said today by Mick Lynch, if workers are sacked over this, then all workers need to stand up together. All workers need to find a way of taking collective action, and that's what we'll be looking at.
I mean, if a worker is fired, what happens to that person? What do you do?
Well, I mean, the point about people being fired over the bill has already been set out in the TUC policy. So it's collective action, it's making sure that we have non-compliance, and it's making sure that we're also clever. I don't believe in you just suddenly go over the top and you play right into the hands of these people. It may come to that, but you have to build towards it. So that's what we do.
So going on to Starmer.
Yeah.
So Starmer, I mean, the feel from this conference is that he is going to repeal the strikes bill if he is to get into government, and there seems to be quite a positive reaction to that. We haven't actually had a time frame of that. Is there a time frame in your mind of when you expect it to be repealed?
Well, there's that time frame of the first 100 days, isn't it? Which I think I've heard him say at some point. I mean, it's not a feel of the conference, is it? It's the policy that he set out that Labour have adopted, which is the New Deal. And I think one of the key things for the trade union movement to do is to make sure that Keir Starmer and the Labour Party actually adopt not just the title of the New Deal, which CWU was the first to sort of lead that campaign. It's about adopting the policies that are within it and not watering any of them policies down. So I think that, that's the challenge, isn't it? And what sits underneath that really is, a moment where you have to look at the inequalities in the UK, across the world. You have to look at some of the problems that are hurtling towards us: climate change, AI, digital revolution, industrial revolution, attacks on jobs everywhere. You have to realise that the previous way the economy has worked is not going to solve those problems, and you have to decide to do something radical about that. And I think the real challenge is, Labour may well think that, by being sort of steady as they go, that's going to win them an election. But I think our job is to convince them that actually these policies workers would welcome everywhere in the UK, and it would guarantee them a win on the election. The other thing I would say is Labour's going to get one chance at this. I think they'll win the election. And if they do what, some people are saying they may do, which is not really go for it that much, not change that much, tinker at the edges. I don't think that they'll just do that. I think they'll have to go further because the situation is so difficult for people. But if they were to do that, it'll be a one-term Labour government, and the fear that myself and many other people have got is that I think with what you're seeing around the world at the moment, I think you're going to see the end of that being, if they don't deliver real change, the end of that being the most right-wing government supported by a sort of rise of world fascism, I think that's what we're staring at. So it's so important that they have the confidence to deliver a seriously progressive agenda. We all know they're inheriting a load of problems, and we can't just say, well, that ain't true, because it is true. And we have to understand what that means in terms of priorities, and what that means in terms of the timing of some of the things that we want to see on the agenda. And that's a discussion that the movement, Labour, and those who are affiliated to it, and the Labour Party members and the Labour Party conference has got to start talking about. So we're willing to understand their problems. What they've got to do is recognise what our issues are at the moment, and that the only way really to change things is to be bold, is to be radical, because things are so broken everywhere you look at the moment.
Do you think you'll encourage other unions to disaffiliate if Labour don't repeal it in the first term?
I'm not looking to that debate. I don't understand, at this point, we've got a Tory party in who are doing some diabolical things, who are not solving any of the problems. That debate to me is the wrong debate for this particular time. So I think you